Hi, Eva here. Today I'm going to show you how to paint an abstracted white rose, and it's demoed in a class setting. So I have the tracing on my website so you can follow along. Have fun and hope you enjoy this demo. True to form, I of course erased most of my lines so you can barely see them because I don't really like lines so much, but that's a personal thing. If you love lines, go for it. And I do watercolor pen and ink, and sometimes even if I didn't plan it originally, like if I have a watercolor and I'm done with it and I'm kind of like, kind of a little boring, then I'll sometimes go in with an ink pen and go in and give it a little line work, and it's amazing what that can do. It's like one like this. I have different kinds. Just has to be archival. But this is not my plan for this one. But as you know, we can plan and then something else happens. That's how it is. Got a couple of brushes ready. And this is supposed to be a white rose. But you can see I have plenty of color in here. Because if I just left it white, it would look very boring, very flat. So you got to put color in where there's shadow areas. So, and this is kind of abstracted. So you can see this one looks like this. That's just a little photograph. And here's another one I did. Different interpretation. So, and this one's going to be a third interpretation. I cannot tell you exactly how it's going to end up because I don't know. We'll see what happens. My two water containers. One for clean water, one for rinsing out my brush. Spray bottle. Oh, remember I said I had kind of a sad story to tell you? Remember we talked about this famous dot bottle last time? Mm-hmm. And I promised you I'd go home and order a whole bunch, which I did, except out of stock. What? And there's only one place in the whole country that I know of, and it's an artist on the East Coast. He has a monopoly on these particular things, and he doesn't want to sell it he won't sell it to retail stores. He'll only sell it to other artists. And so I signed up because then he said, unfortunately, out of stock temporarily. So I don't know where he gets them. If I did, trust me, I'd get them. But so I wrote on that list, waiting list. So I have 40 bottles coming whenever they magically appear. So stay tuned. But luckily you don't need it for today. So what's the deal about this bottle? Yes, it's a watercolor. It's watercolor nerdy stuff. Okay. So most of your bottles would be like this one. I mean, don't pay attention to that. But it's. Hopefully I don't spray anybody. See how it comes out in a mist? And if I tap it like this, nothing happens. Okay. This one, I can also make it come out in a mist. Hopefully I don't spray anybody. Like that. But I can tap it. And can you see what happens? I get little dots. And this one has an arrow on top here. And it has a little tiny dot behind it. Watercolor lingo, dot bottles. Because they'll do that thing. And it's not like you can get dots other ways, but they're not as predictable. So you can just, load up a brush, tab it, you'll get some dots. They're just, not quite as contained as in this bottle. So it's not like you can't paint without this, but.
Does it have to be in a specific spot? That kind of just generalized, you could do the brush thing.
Well, you can, it all depends, what you are aiming for. If you want it in just a particular spot, you put something over to protect the area where you don't want the dots to go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, either way. So either if you do it with this, or if you do it with this one here, or any other. Kind of longer floppy hairs do better. Like some of those cheap Chinese brushes, they're excellent for this. So anyway, that was the little dot boys bottle story. So let's get some color on here. What colors do we want? Well, it's up to us, but I'm gonna go with my all-time favorite color, Cobalt blue. Let me do it here. Cobalt blue. It's a beautiful, beautiful blue. It's a very forgiving color. We've already used it. I love that color because it lifts very easily, and it's just a very soft color. So you can kind of get some color on to define your areas, but you can also get, you can lift it up easily with a little bit of a scrubbing. You don't really need to scrub. It'll come off. And then, if you have it, you can get a little bit of this fun color. That is my Opera Rose, super bright pink. I'll put that over here. So in watercolor, you'll never see me, and if you do, call me out. I don't think you will see me do that. I break my own rules all the time, but not this one, I don't think. You never go from the well with the color and then straight to your painting. You gotta do some mushing. And we're not talking dog mushing here. We're mushing paint around, making sure that all the particles are dissolved in the water. If you have little undissolved particles in your paint and you go paint here, you're gonna get a stripe or something happening that you didn't want. And these things always happen in very critical areas where they're really not helpful at all. So lots of mushing around, mixing your colors, making your puddles. So that's your preparation. I find, to me, it's almost like, it kind of, I don't know, gets me in the mood for painting when I do this stuff. So I have my Opera Rose, I have my Cobalt blue, and then I'm gonna go with my transparent yellow. Let's get a little bit of that out here. Or any other yellow you want. I mean, you don't have to use the same colors I am using, but what kind of colors am I using here? What am I mixing here? Well, basically the primaries, right? Red, blue, and yellow, which is what I usually paint with, the primaries. And then they are the colors from which you can mix all sorts of the other colors. So here you can see I already got a little bit of lavender in my dirty water. Dirty water always tells a story. Now I'm gonna rinse out my yellow brush. And can you see how that neutralized it? Made it a little bit more kind of brownish, because that's what happens. If you mix all three primary colors together, you're gonna get mud sooner or later. Or if you wanted it, then we call it neutrals. If we don't want it, we call it mud. And that's why you hear a lot of painters talking about mud. Oh, it got muddy. And that's what happens if we mix too many colors and let them mix and mingle, and then sooner or later they go kind of muddy. So we try to avoid that. All right, so we're just gonna start a place, and I am going to take my big brush and clean water on it and make sure I get all that air out. And then you can see I usually do like this on the edge of my glass to kind of get that extra water off. And then you can see on it, since I have a lot of water in there, get all those droplets on the shaft. Those are also little dangerous things, so let's get them off. Little stop on my water control station to get that extra drop of water off. And then let's just go with something easy. I always like to start in an easy area. A little bit more water. And then I go in here. I'm painting this. That's where I'm going to start. That one. That's this one here. And I'm putting some clean water on that whole area, and I'll hold it up so you can see it. And I usually don't go all the way out to the lines because the water is going to seep a little bit past. So let's see. Can you see where the shine is? That's where I have the water on. Fix a little bit there. In watercolor, we can't always see where we put the water on, so we have to kind of hold it up and have it catch the light so we can see where the shine is. The shinier it is, the wetter it is. So I'll put a little bit more water in, because I want it to really flow. The more water you have on your paper, the whiter and faster your colors flow. The more they're going to dry lighter too, because you have more water on. And we're trying to keep the white of our paper, that's the white. We don't use white normally, except when we cheat. But we don't start out cheating, that's just afterwards, if we need to. All right, so I think I'm going to stick with this big brush because I don't want to be fiddly right now. Right now I'm putting the big washes on, just trying to divide, petals from petals and kind of get a little bit of a sense of where we're going with this. So I'm just going to dab my brush into, just a tip, into my cobalt blue. And take it over here so you can see. Just see, I'm not like dabbing the whole brush because I'm staying with the big brush. And just for fun, I might just say hello to the pink. Now I don't know what's going to happen because that's how I like it. Ooh, see how it spreads? So I'm just going in here and I'm going at the bottom of this petal because the petals are going to be darkest right at the bottom, and I want to have you read it, have it read as if it was a white. So I don't want to have like really dark color on. And then I'm holding it up a little bit. Just get it out here. And you can see how it flows. Wherever you have water on, that's where it's going to flow. And so maybe I'll do like this, a little bit like that. Might dab into a little bit of the pink here just because I can. Rinse it out. And as long as it's this wet, that's your playtime. So now I rinsed out my brush, I dabbed it on my water control station, and now I'm just going to, with the tip, just going into that pigment that I deposited, and I'm just gently guiding it so that it goes out to the edges where I want it. And maybe I'll just do one more like this. So it can just be a little indentation maybe in the petal. And now I'm just going to let it dry, do its thing. Clean my brush again. Can you see it's stopping right here because I didn't put water on there. Now I don't want it to dry like that. It's going to dry with what I call a ghost edge, very, very pale edge. So I'm just going to, again, with the tip of my brush here that's damp, not wet, I'm just going to nudge it so that it goes all the way out to that pencil line, that faint pencil line. And there we have it. That's my first petal. And you can see I put that little pink in just for a little entertainment. We are entertaining the viewer's eye. That's what we have to remember. All right, so that was one. I'll do one more. And let's jump over. So we can't paint this one. We can't paint this one. Can't really paint this one because they're all touching. And this is still wet. We got to let it dry before we paint an area next to it, because otherwise they're going to run together, create blooms, all sorts of things. That's not what I want. So I'm going to jump over, and I think I found another really easy one. This petal here, I'm going to paint that one up there. That's this, I think it's this one here. Yeah, this one, this one. Okay, same story. Put some clean water in, and I'm going to leave, what am I going to leave? I'm going to leave these areas without paint on. Every time I paint this, these lines can all be interpreted a little bit differently. So I am interpreting this area as one petal that has a fold over. I don't want to paint that fold. This fold here. See that? It's like a petal that's like this, folded over. So I don't paint that.
You don't paint the fold over?
I don't paint the fold over right now. I'm painting it maybe later, but not now.
Right.
I got a little water in where I didn't want it. Then just take a Kleenex, dab it out. So, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. What color do I want? Maybe I'll just go with the cobalt here. And I'm, again, same thing. Just got a little bit on the tip of my brush. And again, don't mess around with little tiny brushes. It's not, you think sometimes it's easier, it's really not. Would it be fun? Yeah, I think it would be. So I'm just gonna dab a little tiny bit of the yellow in just to get it, and see, yellow and blue, right? What do? They go green. So I want a little green. I feel like a little green right there. And now I cleaned out my brush. Notice how many times I go on that water control station to just make sure I don't have too much water on my brush. And I'm just, with the tip of my brush, I'm just guiding it up here. Want to have just a little bit of color on, not much, just a little bit. Just guiding it around. Light touch, and there. I think we're good. And again, the water is going to help me do the rest. And I like to hold my paintings and guide my colors with gravity. You know, gravity can be our friend, gals, for a change, right? Yeah. So there's 2 petals. Why don't you go paint whatever petals you can paint, and then we'll reconvene up here, and then we'll move on. So here you can see I've just sped through the demo on how to put the color on all the petals in the rose. It would be too long of a video if I just painstakingly went through each and every little petal with you. And the basic thing you want to remember is that the petals will be darkest at the bottom or closest to the center of the rose, and then they typically become lighter as you move out towards the edge of the petal. That's where the light would hit them. And remember to keep your colors light if you want it to look like a white rose. But you know, you still need to put some color on to give them form and shape. So here we are, and everything is dry, and you can see how my center dried very light. I don't want it that light, but I'm not going to worry about it now. Now I'm going to put the dark on the edges, because that way it's much easier for me to judge, because right now I'm still judging against white paper. And especially for a light flower like this, that really throws off my judgment on what's light and what's dark. Because right now the flower looks very dark, actually, in a sense. You know, when you want to say that it's a white flower, it doesn't really look that white, because I have white out here. So let's try and see if we can take care of that by actually putting the darker color out around the edges. So I'm going to go with my Opera Rose, my French Ultramarine blue, which is my substitute for my Cobalt blue because I want darks. And then I'm going to go with my transparent yellow, which are the colors I used in my flower. I can't remember. I think, did I by any chance, did I use any quinacridone red? I can't remember. I don't think I did. I think I just used the Opera Rose. So I'll see how I get along with just using those 3 colors. And then if I feel that I can't really get dark enough using the Opera Rose as my red, I'll kick in some of the quinacridone red. But we'll try this first.
Yeah, I used quinacridone.
Yeah.
And you can see my flower came out much darker because I didn't have Opera Rose.
Right. And of course we can always tone down colors and make them less dark, less intense by putting more water in, make them paler. Because that means that, you know, more of the white of the paper can shine through. Basically, if you're thinking about watercolors, the closest thing I can tell you about, you know, the matter of transparency is if you think about stained glass windows. If you have a stained glass window or, you know, piece lying down on a table or something so there's no light coming through, it looks very dark and the colors don't really, they're not very clear. And then the minute you hold it up, you know, in a window and you get the sunlight through it, the transparency of the glass, the colors become brilliant. And it's a little bit the same with watercolors. If you paint really, really opaque, you don't get the white glow from the paper underneath the pigment because you have obscured it too much. So it's important that you put, you know, enough water in your pigment that you still get some of that transparency, especially when you're going for the lighter colors. And the more you glaze over it, you're glazing, and I glazed here, can you see, and then less and less of the white of the paper shines through and it you know, gets darker and darker.
What is glazing again?
Glazing is another layer of the color over something already painted. And you still do it in a transparent manner. And in general, in watercolors, even when I do these very dark backgrounds, I don't want it completely opaque. I feel it makes a watercolor start looking dead. And And I also see very often, it's mainly painters that come from an acrylic background. They tend to, in the beginning, paint with like thick paint. Well, that's not how we do it in watercolor. They have to flow, and you have to get that glow from the white of the paper. Still allow that to shine through. That's what bounces back the light, and that's what makes watercolor look like they glow almost sometimes. That's that white. All right, so now I got my little puddles here. And you can see where can we start? So I think I'll start here, and I think in this corner here. And again, it's one of those cases, don't go pedaling around with a little tiny brush. So I'm gonna go with probably just my number 14, because these areas are not that big, not as big as when we painted the Gabbard Daisy. So let's see. Let's just start with, we'll start with some of the pink. And I'm just gonna put some of that in. I'm gonna dip my brush into some of the blue. And then I'm gonna dip it into some of my yellow. And you see, I did not rinse out my brush in the meantime, did I? Nope, I did not. And I'm gonna go in with some of that green up here. Combine that, maybe a little bit of the pink here. So when I have all three colors on my brush, as you know, it will create some neutrals, but I don't mind some neutrals out here in my background. Let's get
It's
a
a
little.
dry brush.
I do it on dry paper.
Yeah, I mean.
Because
dry
I
paper.
wanted, so the brush is very loaded with pigment, but I want it to be drying dark. So if I put a lot of water on my paper, it's going to be drying very light. And that's not what I'm after here. I'm after a dark background.
What makes the flower just pop out?
Yes, and that's what I want to show you. And see,
Right.
I think these little spots where I've got a nice little glow of the green there from that mixture, that looks lovely. And in between, once in a while, when you've been dipping in all three colors, you need to rinse out your brush, otherwise it's gonna go really muddy in the end. Get all that water out, and let's see here, let's get some yellow in here. And in here, and some of the blue. I'd like to get another little bit green going on here. And then I can go a little bit with the pink here, so that's gonna go kind of orangey and then kind of neutral. There, let's get a little bit more pink over here. Get some of the blue. And so this background's not gonna be quite as dark as the one we did with the Gabbard Daisy, or the one I did with Gabbard Daisy. Mine turned out quite dark, but I'm okay with that. And I do like these colors. I think they, because I'm just using the same colors I already painted with, except, I upped the ante on the blue. I think it makes a lovely background. And I like to have a few little glimpses of some color, because that kind of, some other vegetation is going on back there. But I'm not telling you what it is. That's for your imagination to figure that out, right? And can you see already here, I feel it changed our perspective on how dark the flower was. All of a sudden, this dark background is making the flower look a heck of a lot darker, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And so now I'm just gonna dab out. Can you see I have a little, I have a little droplet here where I had to paint a little bit wetter, and I just wanna soak that up with a bit of a thirsty brush before I get a mark. There. And then I might go in and just roll my brush here. I might go in just with the tip here, and that's what you could do with a little bit of a smaller brush if this made you too nervous. There. But other than that, and I have a little white sparkle there, I don't want that. Those things you can take care of afterwards. But other than that, I'm pretty happy with it. I'm pretty happy with this area. And so that's how I'm gonna paint. So I have this area, and I have this area goes. But you can see how our shapes are very, very simple. I do not see you having a problem. And that's why for something with these kinds of edges, I wouldn't bother putting masking fluid all the way around, because that takes time, then that has to dry. And then maybe my masking fluid application wasn't perfect, so then I still have things to fix afterwards. So I think you can swing this one, no problem. So there you have it. That's the background. And then when you've done that, we're going to go back, evaluate with the dark background, and then we're going to go in and put a little bit more dark here, and there might be some areas where we want to put in some darks to really give it more shape. So first of all, with the background, this is a little bright. I do feel that it draws your attention, and this one could also be toned down a little bit. These orange areas, little bright for about, and I have that little sparkle there. It's not ideal either. So how I take something down without destroying what I did originally. I don't want to lose all those. I think those are lovely color transitions, just a little on the bright side. So I made myself a mix. Well, it's not a mix, but I made myself a puddle of very watered down cobalt blue. That is my go-to color for toning down areas that just needs to be pushed back just a notch. And then I take a big brush. Don't wimp around with little brushes for this. That's not gonna work, because you need to have as few brush strokes as possible. And you don't want to go back and forth, because then you're going to loosen that, you're going to dissolve that color, and it's going to come up and want to mingle, and then you get mud. I don't want mud. I like it the way it is. I just need to pale it down a little bit. So I use a big brush. I usually use this one, a wash brush, you know, one that I use to wet down big pieces of watercolor paper for wet into wet wash. It has soft, very soft bristles, so it won't scrub. And I have water on it. Take some of it off, a little bit on the water control station, and then I dip it into my very watery cobalt blue. Bless you. My very watery cobalt blue. Load it up. Little pit stop here. And then I bravely go in, and I'm going to try and do it as few brush strokes as possible. So I'm going to start here. Toning it down, and there we have it. That's what I want, just like that. And then I can just do it like this, and I actually maybe have a little bright spot here. I could also tone down just a little bit, and I might be able to get up and get that one taken care of. Yep, there it went. And then you want to make sure that you don't end up with any lines. So I just go in with a damp brush and just make sure that I'm not going to have any of those ghost lines that I don't like. So I'm barely touching, folks. Just like this. And so there's that taken care of, maybe a little bit out here like that. And I don't think I get any lines there. Can you see? It's still there, but it's not as bright. It doesn't draw your attention the same way. So now this one looks brighter because I took care of that one. So one more time, get your guts up, few brush strokes as possible, go in, take care of business, and get out. That's really what it is. And I'm just doing this very lightly. It's not going to do much. Just that way I don't get any ghost lines or anything like that there. And you can see how I lifted a little bit right there? Because the minute you start scrubbing, you're going to start lifting the color underneath, and that's exactly what you don't want. So you've got to have a pretty wet brush and a very light touch. No scrubbing back and forth. There, I think that's good. See, now I've got a little problem right there. So I'm going to dab in a little bit more pigment, just right there. There. I'm going to call that good before I mess it up. But can you see how that took care of it? Now, there was one of you, and that was you. Give me your name again.
Sita?
Sita. You're Sita. So now I've got Sita and Daisy. Sita has areas, she doesn't have any problems with it being too light or anything. And see, I have a little hair here. And I'm going to listen to my own advice. Don't touch it. Let it dry, and then I can blow it right off. If I start fishing it out now, I'm going to get a big boo-boo there because I'm going to start picking up pigment and stuff. And then I'm going to have a much bigger problem on my hands than that little hair. See, we got to control ourselves as watercolorists because we want to go in, right, as women. We want to go in, we're going to fix it right away, right? Yeah. No.
Thinking about it.
Yeah. And we got to control ourselves and say, leave it be. It is not the time. And if I just leave it be, it's not a problem. If I start fixing it now, it's a problem.
Okay.
I guarantee you. So I'm not going to show you. Okay, so that was number one. And number two, this is wishy-washy little area there. Oh, there was one thing I was going to say, Sita. So Sita has an area where maybe you can grab her painting there just so you can see what I'm talking about. And she has a lovely dark background, did a good job. And if you just, thank you very much. Lovely, very lovely. But she's feeling that her blues are a little too bright. And I can agree that could be a case for that. I kind of like the background, but if that bothers you and you think it's too much, it's fighting with the flower. Now, is it going to help putting cobalt blue over that, do you think? No, it's not, because then I'm just putting blue over blue. So I need to use my knowledge of colors and say, okay, since what my problem is in this one, thing there, is that I have too much blue, I need to get the complementary color to blue and tone it down with that. And what is a complementary color? What is the complementary color to blue? Orange. Now, I don't want to go with orange, but I will go to the other kind of good neutral color that is almost orange, which is our burnt sienna. So sometimes, depending on what the problem is, sometimes instead of using cobalt, you actually use a very, very thin wash of burnt sienna to tone down something that's too blue, bright blue. Does that make sense? Because it's going to gray down just a little bit. So you need to make yourself a very, very thin mixture of the burnt sienna and use a big brush and do what I did with the cobalt. You do that with your burnt sienna, and we'll take a look once you've done that. Okay. So, and you have a lot of, it's almost, not almost, it's really, you have pure pigment here. Can you see that? We actually lost a little bit of the transparency, right? There's no transparency here because it's so thick. So you have to be extra careful not to go scrubbing back and forth, because the thicker the pigment is on your paper, and especially a color like French Ultramarine blue, which is not a staining color, it will lift easily. So the thicker the paint is that you have on your paper, the easier it lifts again. And then non-staining colors, which would be cobalt, French Ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, they're not staining, but that also means so they don't really sink into the fibers of the paper as much, and so they're more on the surface, so they also lift easier. So that's the drawback of non-staining colors, is they lift easier, so they're harder to glaze over. Where staining colors, they sink into paper, they're very hard to lift out highlights because there's stained the paper. But on the other hand, they make it easier to glaze over them because they don't want to come off as easily. So again, as I said with the masking fluid on the edges versus not having masking fluid on the edges, there's always a price to pay one way or the other. You just have to decide what makes most sense. All right, so background, I'm happy with that now. Now I'm not, the center is way too wimpy. So I already put out a puddle of French Ultramarine blue, my Opera Rose, and my transparent yellow, because those are the three colors I have in my flower, except, I have cobalt instead of the French Ultra. So I'm going to try and mix, and they're also representatives of the three primary colors, and so I'm going to try and mix them all together. Now that got green, which is not what I wanted, but the opposite to green is red, so I'm gonna put some more of the Opera Rose in and see if I can get what I'm after, which is a black-ish color. Can you see how it's going more neutral now? So I'm just within this mixture here, I'm gonna try and see if I can find just what I'm looking for, a dark neutral. Yeah, there we are. Whew. I think we're there. So you can see I have a bunch of darks, but this one I mixed here, you know, so it's a little bit of, you know, back and forth. So I'm just gonna leave this brush out for now without rinsing it. I'll rinse it before it dries. And now I just have a little tiny brush, but that's fine, because what I'm after here is, and maybe I'll just do it first like this. I wanna get some of those really dark stamen-like things in here. And I don't want it too hard edged, so I'm gonna spritz in a little bit. You could also, you know, just dab or use a brush to just kind of tap it and have some of it. So now I'm going in again. See, can you see and there I got too much water on, because can you see how it flows everywhere? So I picked that up. That was too much water there. Don't quite have enough water up here. There. And so you got to go back in and kind of pick it up if it gets too wet. But I'm after hard and soft edges, not all soft, and I don't want everything to turn gray. I want to have some of those light areas still, but I want to have those nice fuzzy edges. So I'm just kind of tapping in, and the hard part of this is getting it not too regular, you know, not all same. So dab out a little bit, and then I can go back in again, laying my hand out. You can feel it's still moist. But can you see how I'm beginning to get some of these little darker areas, that some of those little stamen guys that are here, there. And a little bit more in here, and I might have to give it a little rest and let it dry just a hint, or put more pigment on and see. Yeah, now we're going, you know, you gotta have some of those darks there. And so it's just tapping in, and just make sure you don't get it all too regular. That's actually the hard part. All right, good enough. And then I still feel that it's kind of wimpy, this flower. Not 100%. See what I did now? I got two dirties now, so I'm gonna have to beg somebody, thank you, to give me some clean water. Thank you, Sharon. So can you see how this middle now, it looks, I think it looks a lot better. It looks like more like what I wanted it to look like. So that's a step in the right direction. We could even go in, just for fun, I could take a little bit of my Opera Rose here and put a little tiny bit of the yellow in and get kind of this nice orangey color. And I could go in and do a little bit of that in here, because I think that could look good. I think that could look good. I just kind of thought needed a little bit more something, a little bit more oomph, I like to call it. There. Now I think that's good. Thank you so much, Sharon, for doing that for me. And then let's go in and just pick a couple of areas. Eeny, meeny, miny. Okay, so I kind of have to decide where I want that. I'm thinking on this one here, I kind of feel like I want to have some more shadows on it to kind of make it a little bit more dramatic. So it's going to be a little bit of a departure from what I had in the original one I did, but you know, gets boring painting it exactly the same way. So let's go out on a limb, and then I can goof here, you know, goof it here, and then you can take a look and say, I'm not doing that. How about that? I go out on a limb for you guys. Okay, so I mix myself a nice purple. Maybe I want to get a little bluer, like there. So it's a blue purple. And maybe I want to gray it down a little bit. So I just went into my darks here and just picked up a little That way it's a little bit not so purple, it's a little bit toned down. All right, but it's dark. I'm gonna go in and I'm just gonna go in and decide I'm gonna have some cast shadows. So I'm kind of saying the light's coming from somewhere up there. So cast shadows have hard edges. So there's one. Maybe there's a little one here. Where those overturns, they are casting a shadow, right? And here. Cast shadow. And here's the cast shadow. I just look at possible areas where I think a shadow could be cast. So you got to make sure that they are kind of on the same side. So here's one. This one is coming. Just a little bit there. Can you begin to see? These edges are casting shadows. So yeah, I'm going for drama now. I'm sick of being wimpy, so drama it is. So here's that. That one cast a shadow like that. That thing is sticking out. Maybe a little bit here. That one. There might even be a little one in here. And it helps if you talk to yourself when you do this stuff. Oh, and in here, there would be one. So that's folded over like that. And so how are these here folding? Might be nice to have one like kind of in here. There's like a little petal that's kind of folding over those stamens there. So we put one in. Make that a little bit more dramatic. That one, then here. Would be a little something going on.
So that's about the only time you use the hard lines.
Yeah, for cast shadows have hard lines. We have to remember that.
Well, then how do you define a cast shadow?
Cast shadow is, a form shadow is one that tells the form of an
What's
object.
in front of it?
So that means it's gradually turning away from the light. That's soft. Cast shadows is something like here. Here we don't have a good light source, but if you look outside, wherever the sun is, and then the trees will cast a shadow,
Yeah.
and that, if you look at that shadow, it's hard edged.
Right.
It's not fuzzy. Whereas a form shadow, that's like like here on this white paper towel. Wherever the light hits now, we have light coming from all over, but it's hit somewhere and then it gradually gets darker because it's telling the form. The form is turning away from the light.
Okay.
Whoops. Whereas a cast shadow is an object is blocking the light and casting a shadow where that block was. And so cast shadows, you have a lot of liberty with them because it all depends on how, the angle of the light and stuff like that. Like during the day, midday, we have barely a shadow. It's just a little round puddle underneath us, right? Mm-hmm. And at the beginning of the day, we'll have a long cast shadow going west. And at sunset, where the sun is setting down, it's a lot lower in the sky, we have a long cast shadow going east, for instance. And if it's a cloudy day, there's no shadows, or barely any shadows. The less light there is, the paler the shadows are. So there we have that. And here would be another one. This little guy would cast a shadow. There. And then underneath this one, there would be a shadow. Like that. And the shadow takes form from this angle of the light, and then whatever it's casting the shadow on, like these petals are not flat. They have, a little curve to them, a little convey, it all depends, or they might be undulating. So you have leeway, and you don't have to be too obsessed, concerned about it. So let's see, we'll say that this one casts a little bit of a shadow here. I'll go like this. And I'll disappear. And here will be a little bit of a shadow right here. I just kind of make them up. I just kind of in general say the light's coming from here. And can you see how it gives it more? It gives it a little bit more oomph, I think. So they're all there. That's coming from there. So that's coming from here. So this one might cast a little bit of a shadow on this side then. So blocking the light. So you're just thinking about where it could block, where the light could be blocked.
So you don't have as much water on that brush? It's just
No,
mostly-
because I want dark and I want control.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Dark and control. So that's on that side. Could be a little bit in here, just a hint. And that's folding over, and then I could have. See, this is where it comes in handy. Now I can push. Can you see how I'm pushing that petal here out by doing a little cast shadow underneath it? Can you see that? Then all of a sudden I know that that's casting a shadow on this one here. And there could be a little bit of a cast shadow here.
That helped
And it
defines the
only,
petals.
yeah, and it only goes to where the petal ends. It won't cast a shadow on the background. So I'll probably find a few more, but I'm gonna leave that for now. So here you can see the finished result of the white rose that I did in class with the cast shadows that I put in. As you can see, I worked some more on it at home in my studio to just finish the cast shadows and make this flower a little bit more dramatic than the original. This was the sample that I showed the class without the cast shadows. And here's another sample that I painted several years ago. So you can see that's another interpretation. So I hope you have a lot of fun with this. Just experiment and try and see what works. And as you can see, a lot of the shapes can be interpreted in more than one way. So happy painting and see you soon.